Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey-Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Newbanks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Wine, more wine. 42 years they've been making wine in the North Fork. So today, with the help of my executive producer, Charles, I brought together people in the wine and the food business in the North Fork, because you can't have wine unless you have good food. So my guests today include Jonathan Lynne, who is the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the wine which I'm holding, Bedell Cellars. Tom Schaudel, who is the chef extraordinaire on the Long Island, predominantly in Melville and the North Fork. Russ McCall, who is McCall Vineyards, plus he's, in addition to McCall Vineyards, he happens to have some cattle that he raises over there. And last but not least, my buddy, my friend, the man who's been in business, in the wine business for 32 years in the North Fork, Charles Massoud, who's the principal, the proprietor, and the co-winemaker with his sons at Paumanok Vineyards. Charles, would you please open up the wine, too?
Yes, sir.
So, Charles, one of the nice things that happened this year, you told me, and everybody was saying to me, that three of you, plus certain other North Fork vineyards, were recognized by Robert Parker.
You know, Robert Parker's Wine Advocate is perhaps the most influential wine reviewer in the business, in this country and overseas. And they just did a major feature on the East Coast, the title of which was The Sun Rises in the East. And they reviewed a total of 420 wines. And we were very fortunate that they, I mean, like Tom said, they told us what we already knew, but it's nice to have the imprimatur of somebody like Robert Parker on top of it.
So how important is the Robert Parker, let's say, as we would say, the blessing, the good housekeeping seal of approval
Thank you.
For Bedell, for McCall, you know?
It's an additional level, you know, when you go into a place where they haven't heard about you or Long Island, and you need to give them some reference, because a lot of people, if they don't know enough about wine, they go by somebody who they respect. And you wouldn't believe how many people will buy wine just because Robert Parker gave it a rating of 91 or 92.
Now, that's people who are buying wine. How about in the restaurants?
Well, I think that there are some people that follow those reviews, and like Charles said, and they'll come in and they'll pick out a wine specifically that they read about or whatever. I mean, we try and kind of low key that to some degree, because really the difference between an 89 and a 91, what is it?
To a good vintage in the 42nd
Cheers.
year of
Here.
the wine business.
Yes.
Cheers to Long Island and the North Fork.
Yes.
Yep.
It's the greatest untold secret of our time.
Now, but you're the new kid in the block on the wine business, because you were in the gourmet food business.
Yes.
But you went into the wine business in '96. Now, Bedell started when?
Kip Bedell founded the winery in the mid-'70s, and our family became involved in 1999-2000.
Right, and you went in.
We started in
83.
'83 ourselves.
So how does it, as we've said over the past couple of years, the North Fork is coming of age, but now it is of age. It's the ripe age, okay? And how are people learning about the North Fork? And, I can see certain people, the people who go to visit, the North Fork for the wine tasting, how many of those people go to the restaurants in the North Fork? Or are they day trippers, as we might say?
Quite a few. I always said that, I have a tremendous amount of customers up the island, and nobody ever says to me, hey, when I come out and see you, I'll go to a winery. They always say, hey, when I go out to visit the wineries, I'll come and see you. So the wineries are the driving force out there. We're the residual beneficiaries of that success that's going on.
I think the last few years, that's actually what we've seen, that as the wineries have become more sophisticated, as the hospitality side of our tasting rooms and our weekend traffic and that business has become increased, we're finding a lot of... the restaurants have become more sophisticated. They've grown and become far more compelling as the wineries have become a draw.
Now, you were saying part of the show that what's becoming more interesting is more people in New York City, besides the fact that Robert Parker and the other ratings, are that people have tasted the wines in the North Fork once in a while, but now they're seeking the wine that they could buy from the wine clubs. I assume that the three of you have wine clubs?
Yeah.
Yes.
But
I think, Mike, what's happening is that a lot of them have come and visited us over the years and developed a taste for the kind of wines we're producing, which is a cool climate wines that don't have very high alcohol, but they're very good with food. And we need to follow them. And one great avenue that we have discovered jointly is restaurants. Because restaurants have found that our wines, number one, are well priced, number two, they're very good, and they're very good with food, which is the most important aspect. And therefore, New York City, all of a sudden, has become a major outlet. It's a little bit like when San Francisco became the vehicle for Napa Valley. So we're seeing a similar phenomenon take place where, 5 years ago I would have told you we might shut down our wholesale business. Today it's going the other way. Our retail business is kind of tapering, but our wholesale business is growing.
how important is the retail business to you, the wholesale and the retail?
Well, retail stores per se are not strong. We particularly like restaurants. So a restaurant business is very important because it's like a billboard. If a company chooses your wine to serve by the glass, it's like somebody saying, we found the best value. Try my Pinot Noir. And I say, okay, fine. Boom. And they try it, they like it.
So now here's the question, and we've got to hit the little guy in the corner over here. How do you make the decision in your restaurants? You have, what, 2 restaurants in the North Fork? Three.
Yeah.
How do you make the decision on which wines? Because as we heard from both Charles and everyone else, people select wines based on what they're eating, the different type of food. How do you determine whose wine that you serve?
Well, I think it becomes a question of taste and politics. We have X amount of whites and X amount of reds by the glass. And what I like to do is I like to try and find value in all those price categories, because there's value in $25 a glass wines, believe it or not. And, we look at that, and then we look at, who's been on the list lately, and, we try and rotate the list so, everybody gets a shot at it, That's basically as simple as that.
Now,
And it's a small community. It's not like we have 300 wineries out there. And for the restaurants, one thing that they have found is if they stock our wines, we're more likely to refer customers to them than if they didn't. So there's...
Are you saying that if he doesn't stock your wine, what is this, like
No,
the concierge
no,
in New York
well,
City?
if
you know, oh, you want to go to that restaurant? Oh, I know a very good restaurant.
Michael,
but
if you're at my tasting room and you ask me where should I go eat tonight, I said, you know, which of the wines did you want to eat with your food tonight? And I'll tell him you will find
a diplomat is always, you know, when he came from Lebanon, he learned, you know, how to be a diplomat. There's the fact that, you know, there are very few wine manufacturers of vineyards, that you have two winemakers who both graduated Wharton. Now, one graduated in 1970, one graduated in 96, but, you know, an interesting vineyard.
We can't reverse the time. We are where we are. But
so how, you know, what's happening today? Are you seeing more people visiting the vineyards? I mean, we were talking prior, your place has more weddings because you have that larger facility. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing more people going for the weddings, or are you seeing also the traffic, you know, to the vineyards on the weekend or during the week? What's happening?
Well, I mean, certainly, you know, the weddings for us are a separate category of revenue and business. But the traffic, and especially, obviously, this time of year, we're in the meat of the summer just after the July 4th weekend. I think we'd all agree traffic is tremendous. And, you know, increasingly we're getting people to, you know, make the trek from the South Fork, the Hampton Fork, over to the North Fork, because obviously that's where the most condensed critical mass of wineries is.
But, you know, you bring up an interesting point about the trek from the South Fork to the North Fork. There is only one tasting room, I think, on the South Fork.
No, there are, at present, I believe, two.
Do you see, as a question, and, you know, this is an idea on business, do you see people opening up tasting rooms from the North Fork on the South Fork?
We've discussed it. I think, in fact, we've discussed it amongst a variety of vineyards and wineries to do something jointly. We've considered it and contemplated it independently. It's not something we necessarily feel like we need to do. Frankly, there is enough wine retail on the South Fork that caters to Long Island wines, and in particular, in some cases ours, that we have the coverage that we need in that respect.
What about your thoughts?
I think Russell had that idea a couple of years ago. The difficulty is that you need an anchor on the South Fork. You need somebody who has a farm to create a farm stand, or you need to rent space. And I don't think the pressure is so high because most of us don't have enough inventory to satisfy what we get already on the North Fork. But down the road, I think it's...
But you bring up the interesting subject of inventory. The amount of wine that's made in the North Fork as compared to the Napa Valley is like 1% of the volume?
If that much.
Yeah.
It's very small. We collectively produce about 500,000 cases per year. If you draw a circle, Times Square being the center, take a radius to Montauk and spin it, there are 27 million people in that geography. If 10% of them drunk wine, that's 2.7 million people. We can sell each one of them 2 bottles a year. That's how small we are. So we really don't have that much.
And also, I think over the last couple of years, as the reputation for Long Island wines has grown, as we've gotten more support from the wine media and wine critical world, we don't necessarily need a physical presence on the Hampton Fork. I
think the only reason for the presence in the Hampton Fork is it's a venue to go out to. I don't think it's something that really is going to have anything on the.
Plus, we are missing a large portion of the people who only go to the South Fork, where we don't have visibility. But you know, we have colleagues who take advantage of it, so they have exposure to Long Island wines.
And in terms of restaurants, we all have perfectly substantial coverage in the restaurants on the South Fork as well.
Now, what Tom was saying before, prior to the show, is that unfortunately, many of the restaurants in the North Fork or in the South Fork are really seasonal. You know, they have to live for those 12 weeks, the 8 to 12 weeks. I know in West Hampton, everything rolls up. You know, the streets roll up, and there's nothing over there. How do you pay rent for 12 months of the year and operate a business? I mean.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, it has its challenges. You try and amortize that over 3 or 4 months, you know, and get that out of the way.
Are you closed in the winter?
I close one restaurant for a month, and the other 2 I close 1 day a week. but I'm open pretty much all year.
And what about your vineyards? I mean, the tasting rooms.
We're closed. I closed 4 months. Because, you know, people that come to the tasting room want an experience of how you make wine, and our strategy of making great wine is in the vineyard when it's growing. So we can't tell a story.
You can't show them with the snow on the grapes.
No. They want to see what happens, and you make your best wine in the vineyard by your farming practices. And that's what we do about 6 or 8 months a year.
Now, what about what I was bringing up before, the cattle? Do you sell?
That's a good story.
We sell beef.
You sell beef
About 10,000 pounds a year.
from the North Fork.
From my farm. Our own Schaudel cattle. They're purebred Schaudel, and they're grass-fed and organically raised. And people love that. They come to the tasting room, they buy wine, and then they buy beef.
And they can only get the cattle at the tasting room?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to buy it that way.
Yes.
And is it also sold like the wine is sold in wine clubs, can be shipped?
No. No, it's just the tasting room.
Do you sell as cattle?
You know, every once in a while he offers me a horse ankle or something. You know, it's stuff he can't sell retail. You know?
We've had it before.
We have, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, Bedell, and I think Paumanok as well, we stay open 12 months a year in terms of our tasting room. And the truth is, I find in the deep winter months, obviously the traffic is much slower, but you still have a dedicated group of people that actually, it's you know, a nice, you know, sort of a snowy Sunday activity for people to do. And obviously sitting around, we have a wonderful loft with a fireplace that people can sit around and enjoy, you know, a glass of Cab Franc and chat.
Yeah, I think it's not dead in the winter. It's slower, but it's not dead, especially the weekends. Weekends are continuous. People have cabin fever, you know, no matter how bad the weather, they don't want to stay home.
And also, the North Fork is far heavier in year-round
activities.
Year-round residents, too.
You have more people.
Yeah.
But what's interesting also, I think, which is promoting the restaurants of the North Fork and also the vineyards of the North Fork, is a number of these events that I see, the dance events and some of the other food events. How important are they to the business?
I think they were probably more important in the years when the region was emerging, and these were real opportunities for us to highlight for a broad audience of people that weren't necessarily making our wineries a destination. Yes. We would have to go to them. But they're still very important. And, you know, the Hamptons Film Festival is still a place where we like to showcase our wines. There are these regionally specific events, whether they are food and wine related or the Horse Classic or Polo.
But I think those are different type of events as opposed to, I mean, there's nothing wrong. I think Dan's events are basically, you know, a exhibition for them to get advertisers and to get people there, okay? I don't believe it's there. I hate to utilize the discussion of a pay-per-play. Okay, you could be the best wine or the best restaurant, but unless you're going to be an advertiser, you're not going to be listed or included in that product, as opposed to the Hamptons Film Festival or a different type of event where they, you know, it's not 22 vineyards or 23 restaurants tied into that. In addition, many of the restaurants are not from the North Fork. It's New York City restaurants coming out there.
Well, that's always been a little bit of a bone of contention for the East End restaurants. You know, they always have to bring out some gun from the North. I get it. You know, it drags some people from Manhattan out there. But, you know, if this is a Long Island event, you know, do we need Bobby Flay? I mean, nice guy, you know, great chef, but do we need him out there? There's nice guys and great chefs out there already, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You see, we have to be careful as an industry not to confuse who we are with what we do, and therefore some of us have gone to the extreme where we create like a circus atmosphere sometimes, and I don't think that's very good for the wine business. So I think my thinking is whatever we do has to support the wine. In other words, I shouldn't make an event and by the way, I sell wine. It should be the other way around. I sell wine, and by the way, I have a small event.
Right. We're not in the travel business.
Right.
This is not where you go to hang out and whatever you do is fine. You go because you like wine, because you want to find out about the grapes, and you want to find a producer that you like. Right. That's what we're about.
I think one of the nicest things about, and I've been to every one, but I'll be at your vineyard coming up, but, you know, and when people take the tour, and when I take people out there, when they want to hear about it and they see the grapes and, you know, they understand and it's explained about the soil that is similar to Bordeaux and other situation, it's an experience, okay? It's not going out there just for the wine. It's to learn, and it's the experience, and it's the same thing in the food of the dining, okay? Right. It's a different... You know,
and that's at its best. Whereas if we bring palm readers and do Botox at the winery, I think it dilutes what we're trying to do.
And I think for the most part, we've been, I think collectively in the region, pretty self-controlled in terms of those sorts of things. It's you want traffic, and you want people to, you want there to be a certain degree of celebratory festivity to a weekend at a tasting room, but you also don't necessarily want people falling down and having it become, again, a circus.
Which was probably something that most of you don't like doing, is, you know, the bachelorette parties and the other thing.
We tend to put tight controls on those.
To tight control, because those are really, you know, drinkathon events.
Which they can be degree of dignity, you know.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing over there. So, you know, as I said, we're in the 42nd year. How do we see the next 5 years? I mean, how do you see, what's the next phase or the growth in the business? You've been around, as I said, 32 years. You've been in the area for many years because your grandfather, great-grandfather, came over from Brooklyn. You know, that's where all the good people grew up. Right. Okay? You know, not Lebanon, okay? But
it's the Brooklyn of the Levant.
Okay. You know, he went to school in Paris, also France. But so the question is, where do you see the evolution with regard to the restaurants, to the wine business, let's say 10 years from today?
You know, it's an untold secret, and the secret is going to be out by then. In 5 or 10 years, people will know the quality that's coming now, that the winemakers have discovered that the mistakes have been made, and now it's better and better every year.
The vines are mature, the winemaking is mature. You know, we were talking about the fact that the New York Times recently published an article about a producer in Northern California who is adopting a style that is more balanced, more subtle, more fruit forward, and lower in alcohol, so that these wines are more compatible with food. And as I said, I asked my winemaker to write a letter to the editor reminding the New York Times that that's all well and good for California, but we've been aware of this and have been practicing this for in excess of 30 years.
That's our claim to fame, actually. Yeah. I mean, the point has been made. What happened over the last 42 years? We've learned a few things. We've learned to tune to our environment. We've learned to make better wines. Our vines have become older. We have developed a network of accounts. I mean, it used to be when Ursula used to go sell wine, they would say, "What, Long Island wine? Get out of here. We don't have time for you." She would come home in tears.
And they'd say, "Long Island, Norfolk restaurant? I wouldn't go there."
Yeah. And whereas today, a sales rep goes into a store, it's not anymore whether they're going to buy, it's which and how many. So there's been a shift, and I think those of us who have dedicated ourselves to quality, like the two gentlemen next to us and ourselves, are doing quite well.
So how do people learn? Okay, you brought up an interesting thing, that people now with Robert Parker, with the Wine Spectator and all the others, and the promotion, and people know about you, you know, from the ratings and the situation. How do people find out who are in my viewing area, which are New York City, Great Neck, you know, the Greenwich, Rye, you know, Westchester, and that market? How do they find where they can get the wines of the North Fork?
Well, all of us, I think, on our websites have, you know, store locators and, you know, ways to find the wine. I mean, that's really the best way, is to find a producer you like and find out where they can be found.
It's word of mouth.
Yep.
Yeah, on the internet.
Yeah, and word of mouth. We don't have an advertising, but
but you know, that brings up, when I talk about on a number of my shows, especially the restaurant shows, you know, if I would have asked Tom years ago, you know, internet, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, he'd say, "Are you crazy? You know, I'm a chef, okay?"
Still had the signs, eat at Joe's.
Right, eat at Joe's. I mean, this was not something. How important is social media today?
Hugely
having an effect on your business?
It's becoming very important. It's not me. I'm not in that generation.
No, but you have the
but our
younger...
sons, they're very much into it. But you know, there's something else. You know, when I was at IBM, we used to call about value-added partners, and we have value-added partners in the restaurants. We hold hands, we support one another. I think the restaurant business is very important for our business, as you've heard from the three of us. And
they've both matured collectively over the last,
And you know what? And I said this to Jonathan. I was in the North Fork the other night, on July 3rd, and the pouring wine in a place that you opened when it was great at that time was the Cabernet Franc. Right. It was a Paumanok. They didn't have a McCall. I'm sorry, they were wrong, okay? But, this is, at least the restaurants are promoting this. And they're bringing the wines out over there, which are for the palate over there in different situations. How important, and something that I'd like to explain to the public, is the wine clubs. What is the wine club? What's the concept behind the wine club, and how much business
It's a loyalty program, basically, where you have people who have signed up to buy your wine on a quarterly basis or 6 months, whatever frequency. And they want to get your new releases. You have to create events that are strictly dedicated to them. You have maybe sometimes a wine that is reserved for them. And so you treat them with a certain amount of privilege, and against which they sign up for being loyal to you, and they buy from you.
A member of that, they get this fancy new label?
This is our new white wine, First Crush White, which is a Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc Riesling blend with it's the latest of our artist series.
The label is a little different.
Micheline Thomas, who's an extraordinary contemporary artist, among other things, did the official portrait of Michelle Obama, but is a renowned contemporary artist.
And you know what? You bring up
a great friend.
Michelle Obama, you bring up the fact that I know over the years, the governor's award for you a number of years ago.
And remember, our Merlot of ours was poured at the last inaugural.
At the inaugural, and I think that effect of having the wines poured at different places, being known at different places, this is really helping. It's truly having the evolution of the area.
I think it's promoting the notion that this, up until recently, nascent and somewhat misunderstood region of winemaking has matured and has obviously achieved a status that it can be proudly supported as a wine that's poured at an inaugural luncheon. And among other things, for example, if you, I'm sure you've noticed, because it's been played relentlessly, the I Love New York campaign, the most recent commercial release of which was the Danny Meyer commercial.
Danny Meyer and also on Russ.
Right.
I mean, they promoted
and Bedell as well. So, and the region at large. So they've promoted McCall.
As I said, the wines business and the food business, the restaurant business of the North Fork has come of age. It's not the coming of age; it has come of age. And I'd like to thank Jonathan, my friend Lee, Tom, Russ, and of course Charles, the producer, for bringing everyone. And I'll see you next week.